Guys, I've just unlocked a game from 2010. A wank PC. And you know they're trying to blend it? Why are my legs losing? Ugh. The Unreal 5 saga continues. This weekend just gone saw the third set of playtests for Unreal 5. And as promised, I was hot onto it, especially after some of the choice words I had to say about the second one. Utterly dire. Well, you can forget about that. It's genuinely bad. A complete chore. I was reasonably optimistic to see how this one would pan out. I was straight on it on Friday night, as I was in high spirits, as I just worked my last day at a company I'd spent almost 8 years of my life with. And the first game I hopped onto was Al-Basra, and I ended up using the Ironsight RPK, and things were looking good. I was seeing around 70 FPS in most places in Al-Baz on epic settings at 4K. Things were feeling fluid, it felt like a definitive step forward to be made, but those high spirits were soon shot down in flames when we changed map, and I decided to run an optic. We went from Al-Baz to Balea. Now during playtest 1 and 2, Balea was probably my best performing map. It's now my worst. Not only was map performance in the toilet, nothing I could do could get optics to work either. I had huge frame stutters and even worse performance through the optic itself. And this is all whilst using upscaling options. 40 FPS at peak whilst using DLSS, that's not good. If I had the option to play native, I'm guessing I would be measuring my frames on a calendar. Nevertheless, I stuck it out and tried to ride over some of the lighting and shading bugs that also seemed to be plaguing optics, and we then progressed to Anvil. I chose a scoped weapon again, thinking, this is a desert map. It can't get any worse than Balea, right? Right? It did. It was so bad, I threw the towel in. The optics themselves made it look like I was playing on a PlayStation 1, but with the input and visual lag of the freaking Mars rover with its input delay of 180,000 milliseconds. But every time I ADS'd, it would just freeze and exaggerate any input I made at the time of aiming, which completely throws off your aim. And to add on top of this, everything was overexposed around the optic, that then led me to being flashbanged every time I un-ADS'd. So yeah, Alt F4 was smashed, and I'd started typing out a very angry and incandescent script about how utterly wank and disappointing this playtest had been. But partway through this, I stopped myself. I needed to come at this with a fresh mindset, one that hadn't been mired by emotions from the events of the day. So I played some Football Manager for a bit, beat my mate 1-0 in an absolute siege of a game, and I logged off for the night. The next day, I decided to give it another go with a much more open and clearer mindset. This time, the first game was on Goose Bay, a very good performing map for me on Unreal 4. And for the most part, whilst I was riding and rolling around in the back of this Humvee, performance felt alright. But the moment I got out and used my optic for the first time, I noticed it was grainy and had shadows, and it's just not a nice thing to look through. I tried different graphical settings and found that TSR gave me the cleanest optics, but 25 FPS. It was at this point I simply just went, fuck it. I opened my graphics settings and I smashed that low setting button faster than you guys smashed the like button on Slogs' latest videos. I then went from 25 FPS to 144, which was me maxed out at 4K. Holy crap, everything feels so much smoother and fluent. ADS speed, snappier, optics easier to use. Yeah, bits of the environment looked a bit rubbish, but I'll be honest, it didn't really seem to take that much of a hit in terms of visual quality. So I stuck at it because I wanted to play, and I played a bunch of games. And it was honestly like I was playing a totally different game. It felt like Unreal 4 Squad, but it was better in some aspects. At least for the most part. Things linked with the weapon handling like recoil and sway didn't feel anywhere near as extreme due to having higher FPS. ADS speed was quicker too. It was mad. Don't get me wrong, I don't like being that guy who has to play a game on its lowest settings to get any sort of decent performance. But I know as things get more and more optimized before this is released, I will be able to push things higher and higher and start getting that kind of performance on much better and visual appealing graphical settings. Kohat and Nava also performed very, very well for me too. The game, while still on the lower settings, I still think it looked really good. Ignore the foliage though, my word, that looks abysmal in some angles. But the maps that perform the best for me seem to be the more recently added maps to the game, like obviously the new Albaza remake and Sunshine Islands, compared to the older maps like Balea. So perhaps maybe there's an issue in these older maps, in the way that they've built, coded or whatever, that is causing issues on Unreal 5, and that the new tech that comes with it. But yeah, I found a way to get good performance playing at 4K. I didn't get time to swap onto my 1440p monitor, but I have a very strong feeling that I would have had really good FPS on the higher settings on this machine using that monitor. You know what, maybe I'll give that a go next playtest and let you know, because let's be honest, most folk play on either 1440p or 1080p these days, so that'll be a more reasonable comparison for you guys there. Moving on to some of the other things in game though, I'm yet to see any of the dynamic lighting that was teased by the devs before these playtests, so that feature alone has me thinking that we could still be a couple of months away from this even being thought about being released into the wild. But the general lighting itself feels in a really good place. I do like these little dark patches that you can be a bit more sneaky in, I suppose. You know, the amount of times I've noticed an enemy UAV or helicopter because the shadow passes over or passes by me on the floor is fantastic. It just adds into that immersive environment. Audio, again, it's great. You know, I'm starting to hear footsteps more frequently, but there's still the odd time someone can run up to you making no sound at all. But the biggest one for me is the vehicles. Vehicles feel like they can be heard from a much more believable and immersive distance now. They no longer sneak up to you and suddenly turn on their engines at 50 meters, you know, like the Tigers do when you can hear the tires before the engine. And you no longer have the issue of hearing the American Logi from 1,000 meters, like you have in Unreal 4. General handling is feeling much better, especially for the technicals on paved surfaces. Almost feels like a mini racing game. But one small issue is with the quad bikes, is they fall over far too easily, and it takes an eternity to flip them back over. Now, I'm fine with them falling over because that is a quad bike thing to do, but at least make the reset timer for the quad bike much, much faster. And speaking of making things faster, remember the visual zoom eyes feature that they added much like to what you get in Armor? Well, they've completely ruined that by making it painfully slow to zoom in and out. I had to disable it in the end because it was messing with my eyes and gave me a headache. So please, put that back to how it was when it was nice and snappy when you first put that in. It felt really useful and a good feature to have. Now, it's that slow, it's utterly pointless. But the biggest problem I noticed with this one was the mother of all freezes that happens at random. I had 4 of these over the course of the weekend, and I wasn't the only one to get them. But the game would just randomly freeze for upwards of 40 seconds. And for a bunch of people before coming back like nothing had ever happened. But what made it weirder was the server thinks that you're still doing whatever it was that you last did. So, you know, one of these times I was driving, it happens, but because of the freeze, it's locked my inputs. And it ended up allowing me to just drive off the map, and like properly off the map. During these freezes, I could tab out whilst this was happening, and there were no errors coming up, and even Task Manager was saying everything was fine. Everything else on my PC was operating like nothing was going on. But these freezes also caused a few mass disconnects during the game. It's just the bit that was odd was it would affect maybe 10, 15 to 20 people at a time, whilst the rest of the server unaffected, totally unaffected, like nothing had ever happened. All in all, Playtest 3 is showing signs of progress. But things like optics and optimization is still the biggest downfall and requires the most work to get right. Ignoring a lot of the bugs that's going on, this is by far the biggest thing that needs to be sorted, but I mean, let's be honest, the devs are well aware of this. But I also hope that in a few tests going forward, we start seeing the ability to use native resolution. I really want to see and feel how the game plays on native. I'm just hoping that DLSS and all the upscaling options are forced on right now so they can get all the information and data that they would require, compared to, say, if only 60% of us were using it because it would be watered down whilst the rest of us use native. I don't know, just a theory. Spitballing, you never know. Oh, and I forgot to mention, frame generation still will not work for me no matter what I do. But apparently it works for those who've got an AMD card, so it's getting somewhere I suppose. The snowy texture on people's boots and clothes is still dumb, and habs are still blue on some maps. But what this update has also shown me is that once this is out or nearly out, the hard work's still to do, or still ongoing should I say, because the devs have a serious amount of work to do on so many other things to make the game much more playable and bring it forwards. But that's a topic for another video, because there's quite a bit to get into on that one. But for now, thank you all for watching. Don't forget to use code Honcho30 on Squad's online store to save 30%, and make sure you subscribe for more guides, gameplay, and updates. Take care.